How's it going? Adam Drake here, and today I want to share a little bit of information about kind of the final steps or tweaks that you may do to your car before hitting the track. So I have here my buggy basically ready to go. I've done videos on setting camber, tow, ride height, things like that. But I recently was asked about my opinion on setup stations and if it's something that I use. And I think it depends on the class that you're racing. If I was racing touring car, I would use like a setup station, tweak board, things like that. For off-road, not so much. I see people often spend all this time. They get out their setup board, setup station, spend all this time to get it on there, and then they kind of drive themselves crazy trying to make sure that the toe in and rear camber, front camber are exactly the same from right to left. Well, with a setup station, there's a few key things. If you are going to use a setup station, you need to make sure that your steering is centered, because with these cars, they have so much caster, and also a lot of cars on the market have a fair bit of bump steer, that if the wheels are not pointing perfectly straight forward or centered, so if you have toe out, even if it's still toed out, if it's not equal left to right, when you put it on the setup station, it's going to make your camber and toe seem off. So got to make sure that the servo is centered. You also want to make sure that the car is at the proper ride height. Sometimes when you put it on the setup board, the ride height can be a little bit lower or even a little bit higher depending on the diameter of tire you're running. And that's also going to change what your overall static camber or toe is. So for me, with it being off-road, I don't really worry so much about the actual number of degrees for the toe in or the camber. What I do worry about is how it handles on the track. So for me, I have baseline settings for my front camber. So on the MBX8 buggy, nitro or electric, I just run one 1mm washer on the lower arm and also the upper arm. And then for my steering links, I'll measure them, and I usually start at 28.3 millimeters if you have the 3+3 plates. And then for my rear camber link, I'll run usually 20 millimeters of exposed turnbuckle. So I don't even know exactly what that equals to in terms of degree of rear camber, degrees of toe out, or camber in the front. That's just what I know, and I'm comfortable with my car. So when I hit the track, I'll have a turnbuckle wrench in my pocket, and if I feel I need a little bit more rear camber, I'll just add a little bit more, or if I need more or less front toe, I'll add it. And again, the actual number of degrees isn't really important to me. What's important is once I get my car where I like it and I'm happy with it, that I then make note of the washers for the upper and lower front arm, the exposed turnbuckle for the steering, and the exposed turnbuckle for the rear camber link. Now, some guys will maybe disagree or argue with me on this, but to me, with a setup station, it's just more stuff to carry with you to the track. It's more that you can kind of almost like confuse yourself or drive yourself crazy because you're trying to hit this set number. I just want to hit the number for exposed turnbuckle length, and I trust that with the Mugen cars, the arm length, pivot length, all that stuff is correct. Now, it's not a bad idea if you want to still check the camber and you just are curious and you want to know what the number of degrees is, but for me, the number of degrees doesn't really matter. It's how the car feels and responds on the track. So in my opinion, if you want to use a setup station, that's great, but for me, it's kind of a waste of time and money for off-road. Again, in on-road, where you're trying to make sure everything is super precise, and also in on-road, the cars have much less travel. They don't have as much bump in and bump out, and as much caster, so the setup station makes it a little bit more accurate with an on-road car than it is with an off-road car.